need action. And what is so infuriating is every time there's a mass shooting, Democrats in this chamber stand up and they don't actually want to do something to stop the murderers. Instead, they want another gun control bill to disarm law-abiding citizens that won't actually stop the murders, that won't actually protect our kids.
I have very little interest in engaging on the merits of these proposals in a dialogue on the floor of the Senate because they are not serious attempts to make our kids safer. Last summer, there were serious legislators who come to this floor to enact legislation to set aside our differences and pass legislation that makes our kids safe, willing to make compromise. Senator Cruz didn't even sniff that room.
I don't know how you go home to Connecticut or New Jersey or Michigan and look in the eyes of a superintendent, look in the eyes of a teacher and say, no, I will not let you spend the money on school security. You know, when you go to the bank and you deposit money in the bank, there are armed police officers in the bank. Why? Because we want to protect the money we save. Why on earth do we protect a stupid deposit more than our children? Why, when it comes to this issue, the only thing that interests them is disarming the people at home who pose no threat, rather than protecting our kids.
These unanimous consent requests that Senator Cruz makes, they're going to get a lot of clicks online. The confrontation that he's looking for will probably lead to a bunch of cable news appearances being booked, but it's not going to save any kids' lives. The senator knows this is not how the Senate works. This isn't an autocracy. It's not a dictatorship. You don't come down here and introduce a piece of legislation and 2 minutes later demand that the entirety of the Senate agree to it without any debate, any negotiation. The senator says these are the same bills he introduced last year. But as far as I can tell, he introduced the bills he's making unanimous consent requests on minutes ago. They're not even fully formed pieces of legislation. This thing is so ham-handed, one of the bills, that there's literally brackets and question marks in the text. The legislative drafters, at least in the version that I see, haven't made decisions on when the money is being spent. What happened last summer after the shooting in the senator's state is that serious members of this body who are more interested in legislating than enacting political theater, sat down together and negotiated a bill to save children's lives. Did it solve all of the problems in this country? Did it guarantee every child's safety? No, it did not. But let's be clear. Senator Cruz never expressed one iota of interest in being part of those negotiations. Other Republican senators did. And while I understand he objects to the gun provisions in that bill, guess what? That bill also put $15 billion into school safety, into mental health, into hardening our schools, into community anti-gun violence programs. I can't speak about the other members of the group that authored that bill, but I never got a single phone call from Senator Cruz during the month of negotiations suggesting that we add the language he's talking about to that proposal. This legislation was introduced minutes ago. So I'm not able to debate the merits of it on the floor of the Senate right now. It appears to make a whole bunch of changes to the not-for-profit security grant program that the presiding officer knows very well, changes that have little to do with school safety. It seems that there's a bunch of processes changes to the not-for-profit security grant program. That's probably something worth having a conversation with the chairman of the committee about before we pass it by unanimous consent. It makes broad structural changes to Title IV, which is a very important program to schools. They use that money for school security, but they also use that money for a host of other important programs. That's probably worth having a conversation with the members of the Education Committee about. A very quick look at this bill suggests that it likely opens up the use of those funds to arming teachers in our school. I think that's a terrible idea. This is all to say that this isn't how the process works. You don't drop a piece of legislation on the floor of the Senate and 2 minutes later demand that the whole Senate pass it. You do that if your intent is to create conflict for the purposes of publicity. I don't know what the senator's intentions are, but if that was your intention, this is what you would do. If you were interested in actually passing something, you would have dialed up the authors of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and asked to be part of that negotiation. I know we have more work to do. I know it because I spend time with those same families every single week. I know it because I live in a dangerous neighborhood in South Hartford. I talk to those kids who have to fear for their life when they go to school. And that's why my purpose for being in the Senate is to work like hell across the aisle through compromise, not by coming down here, dropping a bill on the floor, and then immediately demanding that the entire Senate vote for it. That's not how we save kids' lives. Compromising, working towards compromise, behind the scenes, not always in front of the cameras. I object.